Sometimes people disappear, not slowly, not over time, but suddenly, in a single moment that changes everything. A man walks around a carriage and vanishes from plain sight. A pilot reports something strange in the sky, and suddenly, his plane is never seen again. And three children who go to the beach on a summer afternoon simply vanish.
Some stories blur the line between reality and the unfamiliar. They whisper in the night, waiting to be heard. So let's listen. Let's talk spooky.
Welcome back, spooky souls, to an all-new episode of Let's Talk Spooky. As always, I'm your host, Shauna, and tonight I want to take you along with me as we try to uncover the mystery of some of the strangest disappearances that are still unsolved to this day. But before we get into tonight's episode, I want to say thank you. Thank you to all of you who have been listening from the very beginning and those who have been joining along the way. We are approaching our 1 year almost of Let's Talk Spooky, and I have some big plans and some big changes coming that I cannot wait to share with you. To make sure you don't miss any of these upcoming changes and exciting news, make sure you hit that follow button. Hit the bell too so you get notified every time I upload a new episode or a bonus episode, which I did drop this week. As mentioned, we're going to explore some strange disappearances across history, stories where the trail ends abruptly and the mystery begins. Because sometimes the most unsettling stories aren't about what we know, they're about what we never find out. So if you're ready, light a candle, gather close, and let's talk spooky. Our first mystery takes place in the autumn of 1809. Europe was in turmoil, the Napoleonic Wars had engulfed much of the continent, and diplomats, spies, and military officials moved cautiously through the landscape that had been shaped by political tension and constant conflict. Among them was a man named Benjamin Bathurst, a British diplomat entrusted with sensitive political responsibilities during one of the most volatile periods in modern European history. Bathurst wasn't an ordinary traveler. He was a rising figure, intelligent and well-trusted with delicate missions across Europe. But by the time he reached the Prussian countryside that November, the political climate had grown increasingly dangerous. Napoleon's forces dominated much of the region, and the British agents moved across the continental Europe were often forced to travel discreetly and sometimes even under assumed names. But on the evening of November 25th, 1809, Bathurst and his companion, a courier named Kraus, arrived in the small Prussian town of Pelberg. Their journey had been long and tense, and they had stopped at a local inn to rest, eat a late meal, and prepare for the next leg of their trip. Witnesses later recalled that evening seemed perfectly ordinary. Bathurst appeared calm and composed during dinner, and after finishing his meal, the two men stepped outside to where their carriage had been prepared and waiting. The horses were harnessed, the road was quiet, and it was here, in a quiet countryside beside the inn, that our mystery begins. You see, Bathurst walked towards the carriage. He inspected his horses, and according to witnesses, he moved around the vehicle, passing briefly out of sight as he circled to the other side of the carriage. His companion assumed that he must have climbed in after some minutes of not seeing him reemerge. But when Kraus approached and opened the door, Bathurst wasn't inside. At first, the situation seemed most trivial. Perhaps Bathurst had stepped back towards the inn. Perhaps he had walked into the stable yard. But as the moments passed, it became clear that the diplomat had vanished. Staff from the inn joined immediately in the search efforts, combing nearby buildings, stables, and surrounding streets. As night approached, lanterns illuminated the cold November evening, and people called out his name through the dark, but there was no answer. Eventually, investigators began to search the countryside surrounding the inn, and a cloak that was believed to belong to Bathurst was later discovered in the area. But there was no other physical signs of the man. The disappearance quickly attracted the attention far beyond the small Prussian town where it had occurred. Bathurst's position as a diplomat meant that political implications could not be ignored. At a time when espionage, assassination, and secret intelligence networks were common tools of war, many suspected that Bathurst may have been a victim of political intrigue. More than 2 centuries have passed since Benjamin Bathurst vanished in the countryside of that small Prussian inn. And in all that time, the mystery has never been solved. Historians, investigators, writers have returned to the case repeatedly, searching for clues in the details of what happened on that cold November evening. The first explanation people considered was probably the one that you have, the most obvious: political intrigue. So Bathurst was a traveler during the height of the Napoleonic War, therefore he potentially could have sensitive information that Britain and Napoleon's empire wanted. And because they were locked in a bitter struggle for control, the contents of his intelligence could have changed that for the war. Some believe that Bathurst may have been targeted by French agents, intercepting him before he could complete his journey. But if that were the case, his disappearance may not have been random at all, but a very calculated act of espionage. But despite these suspicions, no evidence had ever surfaced to suggest that Napoleon's forces had captured him. No sensitive information was ever revealed. Nothing in doing so changed the outcome. No documents were ever recovered. No reports surfaced from French officials. And no credible witnesses ever claimed responsibility, or even that they had seen him. Over time, historians began to consider potentially a simpler explanation: a general robbery. Traveling in early 19th century Europe could be dangerous. Roads were poorly maintained, and travelers often carried money and valuables along with them. Bathurst himself was known to have been carrying funds and official documents during his journey. And some researchers believe that he may have been lured away from the carriage by thieves, perhaps under the pretense of helping somebody with their horse. If a robbery turned violent, would his body not have been found? And if his body had been found, why was that never made public? Now, decades later, this theory seemed to have gained more weight when human remains were discovered in the nearby town of Perleberg. A skeleton found buried beneath the floorboards of an old house that once was owned by an inn employee seemed to reignite the mystery. Some speculated that the remains might have belonged to Bathurst, while others said it could have been anybody. But the discovery came more than 40 years after the disappearance, and investigators could never truly confirm the identity of the skeleton. One other possibility, though, is that Bathurst simply met with an accident. The countryside surrounding the inn was dark and uneven and filled with wooded areas that were poorly lit. If Bathurst wandered far from the carriage, even for a few minutes, he might have fallen into a ditch, suffered an injury, or become disoriented in the darkness. And if that happened, well, it's very possible that search parties simply never found him. But investigators searched the area extensively in the following days of his disappearance. And if Bathurst had died nearby, because remember, it was a short time from when he was seen to when he wasn't, it seems unlikely that no trace would have ever been found. A few historians have suggested that Bathurst may have been under extreme mental strain at the time, and the pressures of his diplomatic work during war times was enormous, and some accounts suggest that he recently expressed fears that he was being followed. So it is possible that he wandered away for a moment, out of confusion or panic, or just hope for a little peace of quiet, and then perhaps ran into the very thing that he felt was hunting him. These theories tend to raise another troubling question. If Bathurst left the carriage on his own, where did he go? Despite the searches and investigations and decades of speculation, no one has ever found the answer, and in the end, the disappearance of Benjamin Bathurst remains unsettling not because of what we know about the day, but because of what we don't, and about how someone could walk behind a carriage and simply vanish. Our next mysterious disappearance is that of Frederick Valentich. On October 21st, 1978, 24-year-old Frederick prepared for what should have been a routine flight. Valentich was a relatively inexperienced pilot from Melbourne, Australia, and flying had long fascinated him. And although he was still building hours towards an advanced certification, he was well known among friends and family as someone deeply committed to aviation. That evening, he filed his plane for a short journey across Bass Strait, the stretch of water that separated the mainland of Australia from Tasmania. His destination was King Island, a small and quiet community known mostly for its farms and coastal scenery. At 6:19 p.m., Valentich departed from Moorabbin Airport in a small Cessna. The early portion of the flight was relatively uneventful. But then about 45 minutes later, Valentich contacted the Melbourne Air Traffic Control. And his voice sounded calm at first, but there was a notable uncertainty in his tone. He asked the controller if there were any other aircrafts in the area. And the answer came back fairly quickly. No, there wasn't. Valentich then explained that he was asking because there was another one flying above him. At first, the controller assumed that Valentich was simply seeing a distant plane or perhaps misidentifying a star or planet in the distance. But Valentich insisted that the object was moving in ways that didn't make sense. According to the transcript of the audio conversation, he described the object as long and metallic with a green light shining from it. More strangely, he said that the aircraft was circling him. At one point, he reported that the object had passed over him several times at high speed, and air traffic control again confirmed that there was no other aircraft known to be in the area, and their radar did not pick up any aircrafts around him. Their conversation continued for several minutes, and Valentich's voice became increasingly uneasy as he tried to describe what he was seeing. Then came one of the most chilling lines of the entire transmission. Valentich said, "Oh my God, it's not an aircraft." And moments later, the controller heard a strange sound through the radio, a loud metallic scraping noise, and then the transmission stopped. Attempts to contact Valentich again were unsuccessful, and the small Cessna and its pilot vanished. Search and rescue teams immediately began combing the waters of the Bass Strait, one of the most dangerous stretches of ocean in the region. Aircrafts and ships scanned the area for days looking for any sign of wreckage or debris from the small Cessna, but nothing was ever found. No trace of the plane, no sign of Valentich. The disappearance quickly became one of Australia's most puzzling aviation mysteries. Some investigators believe that Valentich may have become disoriented while flying over open water and eventually crashed into the sea. Others suggest that it may have been a mechanical misfunction. But Valentich's final report of a strange object in the sky has fueled decades of speculation. To some, the case represents one of the most intriguing aviation mysteries of the 20th century. A pilot flying alone over dark water, and a strange object appearing above him, and his final message over the radio. And then nothing but silence. I have to say that this story definitely struck a chord with me. I do have a couple family members who fly both commercially and leisurely, and one of them owns their own Cessna, very similar to the one Valentich has. So it's hard to believe that over all these years, and with radar advancements, that Frederick Valentich's plane has never been located. It's just an incredibly strange mystery that sits a little bit too close to home in my heart. And our next mystery is probably the most heartbreaking one. On the morning of January 26th, 1966, Australia was celebrating Australia Day, a national holiday marking the arrival of the First Fleet. In the Adelaide suburb of Somerton Park, the Beaumont family was enjoying what seemed like a perfectly ordinary summer day. Jim and Nancy Beaumont lived a quiet life with their 3 children, Jane age 9, Anna age 7, and Grant at the youngest age of 4. The children were known by neighbors to be polite, responsible, and very unusually independent children for their age. And that morning, the siblings asked their parents if they could take a short trip to the beach, a popular seaside destination about 5 kilometers away. And it was a place the family had visited often, and the children had made the trip there before. Nancy Beaumont gave them permission, and shortly after 10 a.m., the 3 children left the house and, due to the extreme heat, decided to board a bus to the beach. Several passengers recall seeing the siblings during the ride as they appeared relaxed and excited, chatting among themselves as the bus made its way towards the summer destination. When they arrived at Glenelg Beach, witnesses reported seeing the children playing happily near the water. The beach was crowded that day with families and swimmers and holiday visitors, but the children seemed content. At some point during the morning, something unusual occurred. Multiple witnesses later told investigators that they had seen the Beaumont children with an unknown adult male, and descriptions of this man were remarkably consistent. Witnesses described him as tall, athletic, in his early 20s or 30s, with blonde hair and sun-tanned complexion. Several people said the children even appeared comfortable with him, laughing and playing as if they had known him well. One witness recalled seeing the man helping the children even change from their regular clothes into their beach clothes. Another remembers the group playing together by the water. But none of this initially seemed alarming. Glenelg was a very busy public beach, and the man appeared relaxed and friendly with the children, so there were no red flags. But something else happened. You see, it's reported that earlier that day, Nancy Beaumont had given Jane a small amount of money for her bus fare and a snack for her and her siblings. But when the children visited a nearby bakery around noon, the witnesses noticed that they were paying with a much larger sum of money than what Nancy had given them. And the bakery owner recalled that Jane paid for several items with a £1 note, something Nancy insisted that she had never given her. It was the last confirmed sighting of the children, and according to the bus schedule, the siblings should have arrived home in early afternoon. But when 5 o'clock came and the children still had not returned, Nancy Beaumont and her husband, Jim, became incredibly concerned. By nightfall, the Beaumont parents contacted the police department, and what followed became one of the largest missing person investigations in Australian history. Police interviewed dozens of witnesses from the beach, the bakery, nearby shops, and search teams combed the Glenelg area, scoring dunes, buildings, and surrounding streets. The mystery of the blonde man that had been seen with the children quickly became a primary focus for investigators. But despite hundreds of leads and years of investigation, the identity of the man with the children was never officially confirmed. No arrests were made, and no persons of interest were brought into the case. Over the last few decades, investigators have followed countless tips and conducted multiple excavations in areas that were believed to be connected to the case. One of the most notable searches actually took place in February of 2025 at a factory site that belonged to one of the persons of interest in the case. It was believed by the son of that individual who owned the factory that he had seen the Beaumont children brought to his house, and that him and his older brother were commissioned to dig a small hole on the property, but nothing has been found as of yet. And the disappearance of Jane, Anna, and Grant Beaumont remain one of the most haunting unsolved mysteries of Australia. And more than half a century later, investigators still cannot explain how 3 children vanished from one of the busiest beaches in the country on a bright summer's day. I found this case incredibly fascinating as I was doing my research, and there is so much about it that I may actually do a solo case on it. So if you would like to hear a deeper dive into this case, let me know in the comments below and we can look at doing something like that. Our final case takes place even further back in time, to the quiet countryside of Somerset, England, and the year was 1763. The village of Shepton Mallet was small, rural, and tidily knit. Most residents knew one another, and the news rarely traveled beyond the surrounding farms and fields. Life moved slowly, and it was shaped by the rhythm of agriculture and the passing of the seasons. Among the villagers lived an elderly man named Owen Parfitt. And by the time the mystery began, Parfitt was around 60 years old and in incredibly poor health. Years earlier, he had worked as a sailor, and stories circulated in the village about his rougher days at sea. Some said he had once involved in questionable dealings during his travels, and others claimed that he had made enemies far earlier in his life. But by 1760s, whatever adventures Parfitt had done were far behind him. You see, he was paralyzed, unable to walk, and confined almost entirely to a chair, dependent completely on his sister Susan Parfitt. On that warm summer evening on June 1763, Suzanne decided to carry her brother outside so that he could enjoy the fresh air. The sun was beginning to set. The quiet lane outside their home was calm and peaceful, and she placed Owen on the rocking chair near the doorway of their house. From that spot, he could watch people passing along the road, see workers returning from the fields, and Susan then went back inside briefly to finish her chores. Not long after, a local farmer named John Derbyfield was working nearby stacking hay. He could see the cottage from where he stood and later recalled noticing Parfitt sitting outside on his chair. Everything seemed normal. But when Susan returned to the doorway to check on her brother a short time later, he was gone. The chair was still exactly where she had left it, except for Owen Parfitt had disappeared completely. At first, Susan assumed that someone must have taken him, perhaps helping him onto a nearby house or carrying him somewhere along the road. But there were no cries for help from her brother, no sounds of disturbances. Nobody even reported seeing anything unusual. The alarm spread quickly through the village, and neighbors began searching the surrounding areas, checking nearby fields, barns, roads, and the fact that Parfitt couldn't walk on his own made this disappearance all the more baffling. If he had just left from the chair, someone must have taken him. But no witnesses ever saw anybody approach the cottage, and Susan never heard footsteps or the sound of her brother talking to anybody. Investigators quickly questioned John Derbyfield, the farmer who was working nearby. From his vantage point in the field, he had a clear view of the cottage for much of the evening, but he had insisted that no one had ever approached or left the house during the time that Owen Parfitt had been on the porch. Search parties combed the countryside, but no trace of Owen Parfitt was ever found. And the strange disappearance soon became local legend. How could a man who's physically unable to walk simply vanish from his chair in the front of his home? Some villagers whispered darker explanations, speculating that Parfitt's troubled past as a sailor may have caught up with him. Others suggested kidnapping for revenge. A ransom note was never made, and over time, the mystery just grew stranger. Because despite the searches and the investigation, no evidence of what happened to Owen Parfitt was ever discovered. No body, no witnesses, and no explanation. Just an empty chair sitting outside a small cottage on a summer evening in 1763, and a man who seemed to have vanished into thin air. So, I think what we can gather from all of these mysteries is that sometimes the most unsettling mysteries aren't about ghosts at all. They're about people. People who walked away from ordinary moments and were never seen again. A diplomat stepping around a carriage, a pilot reporting something strange in the sky, 3 children laughing on a beach, and an old sailor enjoying an evening night of air. Nothing about those moments seemed unusual at the time, but they would become the final moments that anyone had ever seen of these individuals. Because somewhere between those ordinary moments and the silence that followed, something happened. And whatever it was, it took them with it. That's all I have for you this evening. Thank you for listening to Let's Talk Spooky, and I hope you enjoyed tonight's episode as we uncovered some of the creepy mysteries of people who seem to just vanish. Next week's episode is a super spooky one, so I do recommend hitting that follow button and the alert bell so that you don't miss an episode when I upload it on Thursday. And again, thank you so much for listening to tonight's episode. If you haven't already, please take a moment to check out our socials at Let's Talk Spooky Pod on TikTok and Let's Talk Spooky on Instagram. And if you have a creepy story that you want to share with us, please do. You can email us at letstalkspookypodcast@gmail.com, or you could check out our socials and DM me. I love hearing from you guys. Drop a comment, say hi, and I look forward to scaring you in the next episode. As always, stay curious and stay spooky.